Hello and welcome to China Dispatches, the official podcast of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. I'm your host today, Ziting. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the buzzword for 2022, common prosperity. Common prosperity is not a new concept in China. The term was used as far back as the 1950s in Mao Zedong's time. There was a People's Daily article with the headline, "The path to socialism is the path to common prosperity." It argued that collective ownership was the key to improve people's life. In 1979, Deng Xiaoping launched the Reform and Opening Up campaign. Attitudes to common prosperity had changed by then. Another People's Daily article in the same year said, "Allowing some people to get rich first is a practical policy to achieve common prosperity." Today in China, the gap between the income of the wealthiest in society and the poorest group continues to grow. In 2021, China celebrated having reduced poverty level for up to 800 million citizens. This is one of its obligations under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal for 2030. However, the disparity between life equality for the wealthiest and the poorest in China's society remains a problem. In July 2021, Chinese President Xi Jinping outlined his concept for common prosperity in an article in the Communist Parties of China's ideological magazine, Qiu Shi. He emphasized that common prosperity is not aiming for egalitarianism. Individuals will still be allowed to get rich, but rampant capitalism will not be tolerated. While those less fortunate will be provided with social assistance, nobody will be allowed to become a drain on public finances. The announcement of common prosperity policy came hot on the heels of China's anti-monopoly investigation on technology giants Alibaba and Tencent, which caused turbulence in the market. These companies publicly made very large donations to charity as part of common prosperities. This caused many investors to worry that the profitability of Chinese companies would be affected. Share prices in the luxury market alone dropped by 10% within days of President Xi's speech. Due to the concerns among the business community over what common prosperities would actually involve, the January-February edition of Eurobiz was dedicated to this topic. In today's session, firstly, we would like to invite European Chamber President Joerg Wuttke to give his thoughts on common prosperity.
In August last year, Xi Jinping announced that common prosperity was to be the new goal. In a major speech, he said, "Realizing common prosperity is more than an economic goal. It is a major political issue that bears on our party's governance foundation. We cannot allow the gap between the rich and the poor to continue growing, for the poor to keep getting poorer while the rich continue growing richer." Now, how will China achieve this new objective? I guess that's going to be discussed later with our special guest. But let me just chip in one idea. I guess the difference is in taxation. Where China stands out is the limited redistribution through the government budget. After redistribution through taxes and transfer, most European countries and even the United States have a more equal distribution than that of China. China's revenues from personal income tax are only 1.1% of GDP and make up only 5% of total revenues, compared to 20% of total in OECD countries, and more than 40% for the US and Australia, and even more than 50% for Denmark. Though China's personal income tax is progressive and its highest marginal tax rate is 45%, I know what I'm talking about, so relatively high, there are very few that actually pay it. Also, important income categories for the better off, such as dividends and interest, are lightly taxed at 20%, whereas capital gains are even not taxed at all. The bulk of China's tax revenues comes from the value-added tax. China's heavy reliance on VAT, which at 6.7% of GDP equals that of OECD countries, and make up a third of tax revenues excluding Social Security. Now, consumption luxury taxes, the bads, such as alcohol, cigarettes, make up of 2.4% of GDP. And Social Security contributions, 6% of GDP, are still 3 percentage points of GDP lower than the average OECD country, but well above the average of Asia Pacific. They are undoubtedly set to rise as pension funds are increasingly strained and health insurance is still shallow. Moreover, only urban workers are currently covered by unemployment insurance, which became an issue during COVID-19 because many migrants were not covered. Consumption cratered and government had to step in with a stimulus to keep growth going. The heavy reliance on VAT is a very efficient way of taxing, but it also means that the poor, who spend a large share of their income on consumption, are disproportionately taxed. Now, the options to improve income distribution could be, for example, increasing rural pensions. The other choice for China is to ensure that market outcomes become more equal by, for example, investing in education and specifically in rural education. Abolishing the household registration system, hukou, would also allow workers to go to the place where they can earn the most. And finally, further reforms in rural land management would strengthen farmers' rights and therefore the price they can get for land rights when sold are leased. Well, for now, China seems to be opting for a different approach. The rich are being encouraged to make bigger donations for social purposes as a means of redistribution of income. China could certainly use more philanthropy. According to the International Global Philanthropy Report, spending from philanthropic foundations in China is only $4.7 billion a year, or less than 0.03% of GDP. However, even the most generous countries, such as Germany and Netherlands, still spend less than 1% of GDP. So, while more philanthropy in China is definitely welcome, it is unlikely to make a major dent in the income and wealth distribution. So I'm very curious of what the next discussion will bring. Thank you very much.
Thank Joerg for his very insightful observations. It's quite interesting to see the comparison between China and other countries. Now let's welcome our second guest for today, Dr. Guo Peiyuan, the General Manager and founder of SynTao, to share his insights on the concept of common prosperity. Welcome, Dr. Guo. You have been old friends with the European Chamber. Every year you come to share your trend of CSR with our members. So first of all, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me to join this talk. As you said, we are all friends for a long time. So I founded this company, SynTao. In Chinese is Shangdao Zongheng, which is a Beijing-based consulting firm on sustainability. But we also have office in Shanghai, Guangzhou, and also in Chengdu. So we have been working on this area, on sustainability areas for 17 years. Wow. And we serve a lot of companies, including European company with their operation in China on their sustainability performance. And of course, now there are a lot of new concepts, including common prosperity, ESG, etc. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we also notice in our work that European companies, they are quite advanced in terms of CSR. A lot of the companies start the CSR projects in their company and in China quite early ahead. So I think we are also very glad to see or read your report on the CSR trend every year. And we noticed that in your report this year, some of them are related to the topic common prosperities. Can you please share with us what's your understanding of common prosperities under this term?
Yeah, sure. So every year we develop the so-called top 10 CSR trends in China. The purpose of this publication and research is to help sustainability manager in large companies to understand what's happening and what is going to happen. So this year, our top 10 charms basically capture three keywords. One is climate change, right, which is a popular topic in Europe as well. And the second is common prosperity, and third one is ESG, environment and social governance. And common prosperity, it's important terms for China right now, because last year it was re-emphasized again. It was not raised last year, it was actually raised 2 or 3 decades ago, but the government raised this concept and highlighted this concept again last year. And it basically means that we need to realize an economy or social development that can benefit everybody. So in the Western terminology, we can call it inclusive development and or inclusive growth. Basically similar concepts.
I think that's a very interesting comparison. I think that also helps our audience who are not familiar with the Chinese term to have a better understanding the concept. You just mentioned that this concept has already been there like 2 or 3 decades ago, which is quite, a long concept in China. Why do you think there's the need for Chinese government to introduce or to reinforce this concept now?
And I think basically it is the situation that we realize that now our economy grows to a certain level, but we need to also consider the gap between the rich and poor. So when we grow our economy, efficiency, particularly market efficiency, will be the number one priority. But now we realize that we need to consider the gap between the rich and the poor. So we need to consider another important criteria for social development, that is fairness. So common prosperity means we need to make a better balance between efficiency and fairness. And I think fairness and social justice are what we are working on now.
I do think that now we also realize this kind of the gap between the rich and the poor is quite become wider and wider, and in a lot of other countries as well, this could potentially become a world problem. I think we're also quite glad that China is actually taking steps to address this issue. So that leads to my next question. What do you think are needed to do to achieve the goals of the common prosperity? Quite a big question.
Yeah, that's a big question, and I think that's also a question in the government's mind. But I think when President Xi Jinping re-emphasized and highlighted this common prosperity concept last year, again, in his statement and in his speech, he already give us a direction. That is, we need to better arrange the issue of the so-called 3 types of distribution. So in Chinese, it's 3次分配, 3 types of distribution. And I may need to give some explanation for our foreign friends, because this is not a common concept in Western country. And the so-called 3 types of distribution was a concept raised by Professor Li Ning several years ago, and he is a professor in Peking University on economics. And according to his theory, he believes that the society needs 3 types of distribution. First distribution, redistribution, and the third distribution. So first distribution means salary. So you work for a company and company pay you salary. So it's based on the market efficiency, right? Second distribution or redistribution, it's paying tax. So the government will collect tax from all taxpayers, including company and individuals. And then the government will use this tax as their fiscal budgets to support development, particularly in the rural area, and also invest in public infrastructure, and also provide safe security protection for people in the poor situation, right? So it's basically a legal requirement, legal compliance issues, right? So that's redistribution. And the third distribution is based on voluntary basis. That means donation, charity, and philanthropy. So a company can establish a private foundation. Now this is quite popular in China. So you can also use this so-called the third distribution to support the social development.
I think that recently we've all read the news that Tencent and Ali, they all set up their own fund to help.
Quite a lot.
Yeah,
it's 100 billion RMB each. I think this is quite a milestone event, but I just want to highlight and clarify that this 100 billion RMB each does not mean the third distribution. Actually, if you look at the details, then you will realize this fund actually cover all these three distribution, not just one, not just donation. This may include some rural development investment in the poor areas as well.
That's a very interesting point. So that actually leads to my next question. Why do you think it's important for companies to pay attention to this Common Prosperities campaign?
Sure. Company play a significant role, right? And for social agenda, for sustainability agenda, I think private sector have a great role to play. So if you can recall the so-called three types of distribution, business sector are important in each distribution. So for the first distribution, you need to pay your staffs, right? And then I don't know whether there's English saying so-called 996. So working overtime, right? This is not in line with the first distribution. That it means that you need to create a decent jobs for your staffs. So this is number one, right? So company definitely can play a role. The second one is quite easy to understand, legal compliance. You need to pay tax, etc., right? And for the third one, it's about charity. Charity is not everything about CSR, but it's an important part of corporate social responsibility. So you should do some donation, you should support some public activity, and some company even establish foundation. Some multinational company ask whether we need to establish a China local register foundation, and my response to this question is that yes, if you really want to grow in the long term in China, and this will show your commitment, and we do see some European company establish their foundation in China as well. So that's third distribution. So company definitely play an important role.
I think I'm very impressed by the details you just provided. And so we keep on asking ourselves, because I think in China, a lot of the policies, let's say the guidance for company to do their corporate strategy. So or how do you think this Common Prosperities campaign or policies is going to change companies' corporate strategy?
That's a good question. I remember we actually have, as I said, we captured 3 keywords and for the top 10 trend this year on CSR in China. And one is common prosperity. And under this common prosperity, actually there are 3 trends. One, it's the concept of common prosperity. Second, is rural development. Third, is decent work. So rural development and decent work are closely connected to corporate strategy in many ways. So for example, rural development, we would not be able to realize common prosperity if the rural area is still lagging behind, right? So we need to support the rural development. And of course, we have a very Chinese style saying for this is rural revitalization, 乡村振兴. So company can play a role. And it's not just about donation. It's more about how you can utilize your business advantage, right? If you are a car maker, think about how you can sell your car in the rural area so that the farmers can use your car and can use your automobile products, right? So that's about business as well. So that's about strategy as well, right? For decent workers, I think that's also important because we need stronger middle class in China. So we need decent workers, and you can see that the government also very supportive to the so-called vocational training school. So if the worker not well paid, they are not going to go to this school. I mean, the young people will go to the university, college other than this school. So that means the company should consider how to improve the work condition. And of course, CEO will say or CFO will say this will increase our labor cost. In the long run, I think it's true. But I think you can also have some return on recruiting good talents, etc. So how you can improve your relationship with your employees, with your workers, staffs, and how to improve their condition. I think this is also about your long-term strategy in China as well.
That seems to, what you just described seems to contribute to a more sustainable development, to the company and of course to China. So thank you for all this. So the last question is, what's your recommendations for companies on this topic?
Let's see, we'll take the question. Because I work on sustainability and CSR for almost 20 years, so I strongly believe that this is the trend. And currently, this is the most popular topic. No matter climate change, no matter common prosperity, or rural development, I think all are high on the agenda of the government's policy. So my comment or my advice to European companies are two. One, pay more attention to sustainability and CSR for your China operation. Many European companies have advantage on this in their headquarter operation in Europe, and I think this can show your advantage and can earn your competitive advantage in Chinese market as well. So this is number one comment. Number two comment is that I think China is changing, and of course there are some challenge political-wise or labor cost-wise, right? The human cost is increasing. So I think for many European companies, you need to have your long-term proposition in Chinese market. And I would suggest that China is still a market with high potential in the next few decades. So I suggest European company can make a longer-term development strategy and position yourself as not as a European company in China, but as a Chinese company from Europe. So how you can really contribute to the development of the Chinese local community. That's quite important for European company as well.
Thank you very much for the advice. I hope that our audience will also benefit from your explain of the concept and help them better understand the common prosperities campaign, and also take your recommendations so that to have a more sustainable development of them in the Chinese market. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all for today. If you want to learn more about potential opportunities for European Chamber members, such as increasing agricultural efficiencies or providing soft skills training for employees, please download Eurobiz magazine from our official website or visit Eurobiz website at www.eurobiz.com.cn. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of China Dispatches. Thanks again to our guests, Chamber President Joerg Wuttke and Dr Guo Peiyuan from SynTao. I'd also like to thank my colleague Gao Rui, who ran everything behind the scenes to make this podcast possible. I'm Ziting from China Dispatches. Thanks for listening.